AutoMapper has gone through a lot of versions, all the way from version 5, 8, up to 10, as you can see here. But the documentation hasn't been as helpful to me when I was trying to create an application of an ASP.NET MVC application. They have some information here, but I was still so confused because I was trying to use AutoMapper with Web API and dependency injection, and it was giving me so much trouble. And so that's why I decided to make this video for anyone who's in that boat and who needs that kind of assistance but can't seem to find it. Hi, I'm Victor, and today in Height Above Sea Level, we're going to be looking at how to use AutoMapper version 10 with ASP.NET MVC. Okay, so for those of you who don't know too much about dependency injection, it's when you inject an object into another object. So looking at the Microsoft documentation, a dependency is an object that requires another object. Okay, so what this means is, like, let's look at this example. In this product repository, we're tightly coupled to this this object that we're creating here. So that means that it'll be harder to test. And if I wanted to replace this product repository with something else, you'd need to modify the controller class, and it'll be much more of a hassle, and it wouldn't be too good for your application. So this is where dependency injection comes in. Instead of using this class, this concrete class here, product repository, we inject an interface like iProduct repository, like this, into the constructor. And now any class that implements iProduct repository is the one that we'll use in this application right here. So that means we have less coupling, and it's much better for unit testing. And in case we want to, if you have a bigger application, we don't rely too much on product repository, and maybe you want to use something else down the line, we can do that. And this is dependency injection in a nutshell. Now moving over to the Web API in ASP.NET. This Web API, the controller that you're making, it implements iDependency Resolver. So what is this? iDependency Resolver is used for resolving dependencies, and it implements getService and getService. Now, whenever an API controller is instantiated, iDependency Resolver is called first, and it calls getService, as you can see here. Now, as an example, in the Unity container that we use for dependency injection, here's an example implementation of getService. So this is what's called when a controller is instantiated. But the thing about the Web API controller is we don't instantiate it ourselves. It only gets instantiated when the request has been routed. And I can show you that somewhere here, if I can find it. Yeah, the application doesn't create the controller directly. Web API creates the controller when it routes the request. So if we can do something like we did here, where we just create an interface and we implement it, and then when we're instantiating something, we inject it, because now we're not the ones doing the instantiation. The Web API does that when the request is routed. And because of this, now we'll need to use iDependency Resolver. And so now, after that, with this knowledge, instead of implementing this ourselves manually, iDependency Resolver, as you see here, we'll use the Unity container. This is what we're going to use for dependency injection with AutoMapper. And I'm just giving you this so that you can know what we're doing. Instead of, for anyone watching who is using this for the first time, this is what we're going to be using. Good. Now, once we use Unity, let's say we're using Unity now, and then getService is called when, let's say we call the method get customers or get something, the get method of the API. This is what it's called. We pass in the controller, and if the controller is null, the parameterless constructor is called. But because we're using our AutoMapper, we won't be using the parameterless constructor. We'll be using a parameter, a constructor with a parameter. Good. Now back to AutoMapper. How do we use it? But before we use it, let me just show you the project that I have, a little template project that I have set up already. So this is a little project called AutoMapper example, and this is what I'm going to be using to show you how to use AutoMapper ASP.NET Web API. So in my model, simple MVC application with model view controller, I have this movie class with a couple of properties: ID, name, genre ID, release date, number in stock, and length. Now I'll be mapping this to the movie DTO that I have here set up already. So this is assuming you know about data transfer objects and working with the API, and you just want to do the mapping. But if you're not so sure about that, then you might need to get some more information before watching this video. But assuming you know about the model and the DTO that will be passing to the database, this is what we'll be mapping: the ID to the ID in the movie DTO. The name will be mapped to this name, and genre, ID, release date, number in stock, all that will be mapped to these, and vice versa. So that's what we're going to be doing. And for the controller, I have the regular controller and the web API controller. So this is the controller that we'll be using. Don't worry about this for now, I'll explain it. And then the regular MVC controller for when you want to maneuver through the application. And the save method, if you want to create a new movie, it brings up this view, the save method. And for the save method, I've kind of put together the HTTP post and the HTTP put. So save covers both of those. So assuming you want to if you wanted to add a movie, we call save. If you wanted to edit a movie, we'll call save again. But the difference will be, if the movie is new, the ID will be 0, and then we'll be adding that to the movies table in the database. But if the ID is not 0, that means we got it from the database, and we'll need to do the mapping like this. And for the views, I can show you that briefly. Movies. This is the form that you fill when you want to add a movie. So you see the action is save, and the controller is movies. So this is what will be passing to the database. This will be what will be included in the movie DTO. And then the movies list is the list of movies. And here, to demonstrate this also as well, we'll be looking at the URL. We'll be calling the API to make sure that it's working properly. But for now, if I didn't set up AutoMapper, this wouldn't work. But now that we're going to set it up, it's going to work, hopefully. But anyway, let's look at the issue that AutoMapper will be solving for us. So as you can see in movies, this is how you need to map if you don't have AutoMapper. So let's say you wanted to edit a movie. You get the movie from the database, and the movie that you're passing inside this form, we'll have to do the mapping. As you can see, this save method takes a movie, and this movie is where we'll be doing the mapping. So we get the movie from the database, and then we map that to the movie that we're passing in. Set the name of the movie in the database to the updated movie that we're passing in. We set the genre to the movie that we're passing in, length, and you can even, there's a couple more other properties, like let's say movie.db, and then length. This is how you do it without AutoMapper. And let's say you had like 20 properties or more than that. This would be a very time-consuming process, especially if you have many classes. This is where AutoMapper comes in and fixes this for us, so we don't have to do all this manual mapping ourselves. All right. Now, before we get started, there are a couple of packages you need to install. So if you go to Package Manager Console, I just set up a shortcut, Alt+ / and Alt+ period to open this. Otherwise, I'll have to go to View and Package Manager Console. Might be somewhere here or not. Just press Control-T, Package Manager Console. No. Okay. Here, Tools, NuGet Package Manager Console. That's how you get to it. Now, these are the packages you'll need. Let me close this real quick so I can start from scratch. Since I've already installed them, I can just write get package. It tells me all the packages I have. And here's AutoMapper. To install AutoMapper, you just say install package AutoMapper, and it will install the latest version for you, 10.1.1. Now we'll be using Unity as a dependency injection container, because if you look at the documentation in AutoMapper, it says that you can store, most applications can use dependency injection to inject the IMapper instance. And this IMapper can be in a dependency injection container. And that's what we're going to be using with Unity. So to install Unity, we'll be installing Unity.AspNet.WebApi. As you can see, it's already installed here. And the beauty about this thing, when you install Unity.AspNet.WebApi, it also installs Unity container and Unity abstractions and Unity, which are all necessary for you to use a web API. And so once you do all that, I think that's pretty much all you need. Unity.AspNet.WebApi and AutoMapper. By installing those, what will happen is you'll get a few. I can close this real quick. Inside app.start, you'll get this Unity.WebApi activator. You don't really need to touch anything here. It's just, it provides the bootstrapping for integrating Unity with the web API when it is hosted in ASP.NET. So this can be left the way it is. Don't touch it. It's just for when you start, it sets up the dependency resolver and the container that you'll be using. And also it disposes that once you're done. So that's already done for you. You don't need to worry about that. The other thing that you'll see is this unity.config. And this is where you can store your configuration for AutoMapper. Now going back to AutoMapper, let's look at how we use it. So it says once you have your types, you can create a map for your types using a mapper configuration and create maps. So this is the configuration that you'll be creating. So that configuration goes inside unityconfig.cs like this. This is how we do it. And if you look at the AutoMapper documentation, if you go to configuration that we're supposed to set up, it says you use mapper configuration and you only need one. So if you go to configuration over here in the documentation, this is how you create a mapper configuration instance. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can do the mapping in here, or you can create a profile to organize your mapping. It even says here a good way to organize your mapping configurations is with profiles. So to do that, you create a class like this one that derives from profile like this. So I went ahead and did that already. In app.start, app_start, I created a class. This one you create yourself, and I added it and I said it derives from profile. And when you do that, it'll say, make sure you have these using AutoMapper up top. And let's say you didn't have this using AutoMapper.samples.dto, you might get a red underline like this because this, we're not referencing it. We don't know where to find it. So you press Alt and Enter. Using AutoMapper, the example DTOs, you press that, you get AutoMapper up here. Just in case you might find any errors when doing it. Same thing with movie. If you, let's say this didn't exist, you get a red underline here because it doesn't know where movie is. So when you press Alt and Enter like that, it brings up this menu as this using statement up top. So using AutoMapper example, the name of the project, models, the folder, and as you can see, I have a movie class in here. If I take this out, it doesn't know where to find it. I'll need to add this using statement to make sure that I'm using that to tell it where the movie class is coming from. Okay, let's go on. So once you have your mapping profile set up, you can create the map in here like this. But instead of doing this, the other way is to create the mapping in the configuration. So in Unity config, you can put the mapping in here. But since I am creating a profile, I won't need to do that. I'll just use this line like this. So instead of having all those entities inside my configuration, I just had CFG, add profile like this, and the name of the class that derives from the profile. As you've seen here, I created mapping profile. in app_start, and in mapping profile, I created my profile. So I want to map a movie to a movie DTO. Remember, movie to map to movie DTO. And I also did the genre and genre DTO because I want to map those as well. I can show you that real quick. I have a genre DTO with just an ID and name. In my model, I have genre. So I want to map a genre to a genre DTO and vice versa. And that's why I also have this down here. Now back to Unity config. I've now created my configuration. What do we do next? After here, if you go back to the getting started guide, it says you need to create an instance of iMapper like this, var mapper config.create mapper. That's what I did right here. I created the mapper, and if I hover over this, you see it's of an iMapper of type iMapper. This is what we're going to be injecting into the Web API controller, and then from there we register it. Now we're registering this with a Unity container. Okay, so now that this is registered, Unity now knows that this mapper is what we're going to be injecting into the whatever we want to inject it into, which in this case will be a movie controller like this. So once I set that up, I register the instance, and now I can use the mapper. You see, it returns the container. That means I can now use mapper in my project. But you can also use the other version where you create a mapper instance, not the iMapper, but the mapper instance itself. So if you did it like this, let's say you did this var mapper. Let me just type it out real quick. Var mapper equals new mapper, and then we pass the configuration. As you can see, let me just call it mappers. This is of type mapper, like this. This one is of type AutoMapper. So if you decided to use this mapper version, like this, now you need to register it a different way, because we're not registering an instance, we're registering a type. So we'll do register type iMapper, like this. That is implemented by mapper, and then we pass mapper over here like that. That's what we'll have to do, but I prefer the other method because I think it's much easier, so that's why I use that instead. I can just delete these real quick. All right, so now that I've registered my instance, this mapper is now available to be used inside my controller. So now my Web API controller right here, the first thing I need to do is create a field called iMapper, private read-only iMapper. And remember, if you have to use AutoMapper up here. So if you don't have that, this will get a red underline asking where is iMapper. Alt and enter using AutoMapper. If you ever see those red underlines, just first thing you should check is pressing Alt and enter to see if there's you need to add this AutoMapper up here. Same thing with DTOs and models, because I'm using movie and movie DTO. All right, moving on. So now we have that set up. I hope you got everything I said. Maybe I can recap real quick. Install the packages in Package Manager console. Install the AutoMapper version 10.1, and all you need to install here is Unity.AspNet.WebApi. This automatically installs Unity abstractions and Unity container. But if in the event you don't see these two, install the AspNet Web API and install Unity, because these abstractions and container are inside Unity. And once you do all that, what happens next? You'll get in app_start Unity.Web API activator. Don't worry too much about this. You can leave it as is. And then in Unity config, the mapping configuration is what you'll put in here. And you can even just copy this and you put add profile. But the mapping profile is a custom class that we made ourselves to organize our mapping. And it's here as well. We're mapping a movie to a movie DTO. So if you had any other entities you want to do some mapping in, mapping for the while in the API, you would add them here. Let's say you had create map, and maybe you had a customer class that you want to map to a customer DTO. That's what you'd do. Okay. All right. Now back to where we were in the movies controller, the API. Now here, you remember what I told you about the dependency injection and how it calls the, remember how I told you get service? Where's get service? Here, it calls get service first. And if the type is null, it uses the parameterless constructor. What that means is that if you had a constructor like this, sorry, if you made a constructor like that and you initiated your context, this is just my database, like this, into new application DB context, this is what will be called. An AutoMapper will not be initialized, it will be null, and you'll get a null reference exception. So that's why we're using this parameter, a constructor with a parameter, because IMapper here, we need to initialize it. So Unity.AspNet.WebApi gets the IMapper and injects it in here. Remember the injection, dependency injection that we learned about in here, so that we don't have a lot of tight coupling. That's what happens in this. You see, this is the dependency injection that happens here. We're doing the exact same thing inside AutoMapper like this with AutoMapper. So now we can use that dependency injection, and then we set the field for AutoMapper, the IMapper field, into that mapper that we get here. And remember again, we set it in Unity config. Here it is. In movies controller, the API, we initialize it, and now it's not null, and we also initialize the context. That means we can now use it in our controller, or our API controller, sorry. Now that we're here, we're almost done, we're almost at the home stretch. This is how we'll use it. So what we're doing here is movies DTO, we're calling context.movies because we want to get them from the database. And we're saying include, this is eager loading. We're including the genre as well. So after we include the genre, we call to list to get the movies from the database. And then with the select method, now we are doing the mapping. We're calling mapper because now it's not null, AutoMapper. And we use the map method to do the mapping. We're mapping a movie, remember, movie, this is in the database, to a movie DTO. This is the one that we are getting back. Assuming this one had like a million like maybe 15 properties, and these are the only properties we want back. Over here, the mapping, it'll map those properties, ID and name, to this movie DTO. And then that's what will be returned. As you can see, if I hover over var, it's a collection of I enumerable of type T, and T is a movie DTO. Okay, so let's assume like I cancel this out. At this point, movies DTO will be of type movie, and that's not what we want. We only want a couple of properties, and that's where AutoMapper comes in to do the mapping for us. Now if I go back, now that AutoMapper does the mapping, we're doing the projection with the select. Movies DTO is of type movies DTO, and then that's what we're returning. So that's AutoMapper in a nutshell. But before we wind up, I want to do one more thing and test this API with Postman. So Postman is a very helpful tool that I've been using to help me test my APIs to make sure that they're working properly. And so I make a call to the API and it gives me back some data, but let me run this so you can see what happens when what the application looks like. I did a bit of styling as well, and a bit of bootstrap as well. So once this loads, you'll see what it looks like. Okay, here we go. The application and movies. Remember, this movies is controlled by, gives me a movies list. Whoops. movies list, that's in the views. I think I closed that by mistake. Yeah, this is what's going to show when I click on movies. It's going to show me a table, and in the head of the table it'll have the name and the genre. And this is a bit of jQuery. You can use whatever you want here, JavaScript, whatever you like, or jQuery as well. And I'm using this little package called data table. This is just a plugin to make sure that my tables have automatic sorting and searching. So you don't have to use data table. This is just for me. But the key thing here is we're calling the movies API to get the movies. So this is going to happen when we call it. And when I click here, the movies should show in a table. But before we get there, let me show you what it looks like when testing with Postman. So just to make sure that I'm returning JSON content, I've set the headers here, content type to application/JSON. And if you don't know how to do that, you just go to here, headers, set it manually, content. Let me add a new one. Content type, you can click on this, then say application JSON like that. But because I've already set that up over here, I don't need to repeat it. And then to call the method, the get method, we'll go to the home like this, copy this, Control C, then we'll paste that here, Control V, because that's the bulk of the, I think it's the domain, but it's the bulk of the URL. Then we go to API/movies, because this is the API we're trying to consume, sorry. And from there we use the get method, and this is supposed to get us the movies. Remember, movies controller, the API, we're getting it from the database, we're including the genre, and we're calling that to list to get them from the database. We're selecting, using the select method to project to the movies DTO, and that means what will be returned is a movie DTO like this. I hope that's clear so far. And yeah, but just so, another small thing that you don't really need to worry about, well, not really worry about, but just something that might come in handy is in, is it route.config? No, it's route webapi.config. You can copy these settings so that it returns JSON in camel case. Usually if you don't put this, it returns to you JSON, but it's not camel case and it's not formatted correctly. So you can add this settings here, settings config formatters, JSON formatters, and make sure to add the using statements up top, just so it returns to you the JSON data that you're looking for. Now let's test this API like I told you. Remember, the endpoint we're querying, or we're consuming, or we're calling, whatever you like to say. And then if we press send, it should give us the data. Now, before we do that, let's look at the data in the database. Control \S to bring up the SQL Server Object Explorer. Now let me close this just so I can show you from the beginning. You can also do view SQL Server Object Explorer. Sorry. Now here, MS SQL, that's the one I'm using, the database. AutoMapper example, as you can see here, the same name as the project. Open that. Databases, and this one, tables. I have a movies table. I already did the migrations and all that. If I view the data, what I currently have, the name of the movie I have is Avatar and White Chicks. So these are the movies I have in my database. And once I call this get method, those are the movies that should show up. So send. Here we go. ID, Avatar, ID of number 2, name, Avatar, genre, ID, 1, family. And as you can see, Avatar, genre ID 1, number in stock 7, length 2 hours, 39 minutes. Same thing, 2 hours, 39 minutes. Same thing for White Chicks as well, as you can see right here. So that's working. Now let's test this out in the application itself. So if I go to movies, Avatar, and White Chicks, and if you look at the code behind that, movies list, remember the Ajax call to API.movies, that's the same thing I was doing with Postman. I don't know why I closed it, but I can open it real quick. we're querying this API, or consuming this API to get the movies, API.movies, and the movies controller API. Like this, we're getting the movies. And then from there, we're setting the column. So the first column, name, the data is the name of the movie, genre.name is the name of the genre. And that's what we're getting right here. Same thing as what we did when we did this. Yeah, and that's it. AutoMapper in ASP.NET MVC for the web API. Quick breakdown, rundown, summary, just in case you've forgotten. Install the packages, AutoMapper. Install package, AutoMapper. Unity.AspNet Web API. In app.start, you get Unity Web Activator. Don't touch that. Unity config, get the AutoMapper configuration. You can look at the documentation to help you out with that. Go to configuration like so. This is the configuration you want. And if you want to store your configurations in profile, you do that like this. Create the mapping profile yourself. Set the data entities you want to map as well. Movie to movie DTO. That's all well and good. Make the IMapper instance, register the instance in the container, and then now you can use it in your controller. You go to your movies controller, get the movies from the database with a genre to list, then do the mapping. This can also be used with create movie, update movie, delete movie. You can do the mapping now because now you have mapper. It's initialized and you can use it to do mapping wherever you want. Okay. What else did I do? I think that's pretty much it. You can use it here as well to get the movie with a particular ID, but because this video is already long enough, I probably wouldn't be going into that. So I hope this helps. It really confused me a bit because I was looking for the documentation, but all they had was, it wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be. And it really confused me for a while. So I hope, especially this one, because it talks about .NET Core. Here's dependency injection, but it's talking about .NET Cores. It's not talking about .NET, the regular .NET, I think. So this one looks a bit easier, but just in case the others like you, others out there like me, who are still using ASP.NET MVC5, the regular one, this is how you use AutoMapper. And so I hope that helps. Let me know if this video was helpful to you. Please leave a like and subscribe because it really helps the channel out a lot. Sorry if it's too long for you. I'll make sure to leave chapters in the description so you can get to where you want to be as quickly as possible and just get what you need. But please like the video and subscribe if you found this helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you've used AutoMapper with .NET Core or anywhere else. And yeah, that's all I had for you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, from me to you, deuces.